We're back with Therapy is Dope with Alicia and Laura. And today's guest, we're talking about relationships, so it just makes sense for us to have a couple.
Yeah.
We've got Andrew and Kiana with us today. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you guys. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to be experts in this subject matter.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you. Yes, well, thank you for having us. It's an honor. So I'm Kiana.
And I'm Andrew.
Yes, so we are a married therapist and coach duo that helps individuals and couples find clarity, connection, and personal accountability. So those
Mm,
are some of the key pieces that I know that's not a fun one
no.
for many people, but it's so valuable and so needed if we want to actually grow and mend those hurts in relationships and find resolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've been married for 13 years, coming up really soon. Our anniversary is actually two
Next.
months from now.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
excited.
love that you looked
Um,
at her like, wait.
Like that's right, right? 2 months?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to verify.
It shows you've been married 13 years.
Exactly.
We also have an 8-year-old daughter, a little 4-year-old Boston Terrier pup named
Oh,
Belle, and we live in north of Dallas in McKinney, Texas.
okay.
Mhm.
So how did you guys end up getting into the world of coaching?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a therapist. I've been doing that for about 15 years at this point. I kind of got into therapy on accident and found myself just naturally wanting to help people. People would naturally talk to me. And I remember in college, I was in charge of a floor of freshman women, and we did programming about removing the mask and being your authentic
Mm.
self. And then I was like, oh, there's a job for this.
Yeah. I can get paid to do it's natural. What?
Right?
Yeah.
So that's I kind of got into the therapy world and I worked with a variety of clients, whether it's juvenile corrections, domestic violence, addiction, geriatrics, and then kind of the couples side too.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a whole
I
range.
know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like she took every 5 years, she switched it up.
Okay.
truly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
What
So I
about you,
actually got
Andrew?
into coaching. I got into coaching through human resources. So my corporate background is HR, corporate HR. I've been in that field for a little over 15 years now. And through the HR field, you learn about different certifications and programs that they offer. And I learned about coaching, like, life coaching. And, that was really, really popular for a while there in the early to mid 2000s.
Mhm.
And so that was something that I really felt drawn to. It was something that I did very naturally through my HR work.
Mhm.
And so, got certified as a professional coach, focused primarily on communication and relationships. But then I also leverage a lot of the coaching tools and methods in the HR space. So,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. And
I
so
like
we
that.
decided to, yeah, then we decided to combine therapy and coaching since they're adjacent modalities. They're definitely not the same, but they're
Hmm.
adjacent. And we said, well, wouldn't it be cool to offer couples therapy and coaching, with therapy and a coach, a therapist and a coach providing these different tools to attack, relationship challenges. So
Mhm.
that's how
So
that's how it was born.
tag in. Totally agree with you guys that they're like adjacent kind of modalities. I'm curious how you guys address things differently. Like, well, I guess there's two questions. When you guys are working with someone, is it both of you working with someone, or is it like one of you at a time? Both of you. Okay. How do you address certain challenges differently from like, Kiana from the therapist perspective and Andrew from the coach's perspective?
Mm.
Yes, so we really listen for some of those key words there when if someone mentions a trauma or mentions, PTSD or depression. And I we kind of say that therapy helps us understand where we've been and coaching helps us understand where we want to go. So sometimes I'll kind of pause the conversation and dig a little deeper on, like double click
Mhm.
on, someone just glossed over something, and we'll back up a little bit. Where does that come from? You mentioned this pattern, let's understand it a little bit and how that shows up in your relationship.
Mhm.
And then we can talk about the tactical side of addressing that too. And, that's kind of how we kind of deep dive into it, depending on what we're hearing. Or he'll say, hey, that's you.
Right.
Depending on what may come up, he's like, you handle that.
Yeah.
Right.
So we kind of tag team that part too.
Yeah, we definitely try to stay in our lanes. So therapists can do coaching, right? But coaches can't necessarily do therapy
Right.
Hmm.
unless they are certified and all those kinds of things. So I stay in my lane. I will be very clear to say, look, I am not a therapist. So we definitely lean heavily on Kiana to provide more of that, diving deeper into past traumas and dealing with the more sensitive aspects in our sessions. I really come in as just a different thought partner, talking about the different skills or what steps need to be taken to get to the goal that they want to ultimately achieve, whether that's clarity in their relationship, more affection, or
Hmm.
just a deeper emotional connection between the two of them. What does that tangibly look like? What are the things we need to put into practice on a daily basis in order to achieve that, and really challenge them a little bit on their assumptions, on their,
Hmm.
I don't want to say misguided notions, because that's not true. It's just more like, we only know what we've been exposed to in our lives, and especially when it comes to relationships and marriages and things like that. So if you grew up in a household or an environment where there weren't healthy examples of a marriage or what that relationship
Relationship.
can look like,
Yeah.
then you default to what you know.
Hmm.
And if that means when I'm angry, I yell, then that's what you're going to do. And so we try to evoke that awareness and then ask and dive deeper into, hey, is there another way we can address the same concern? Let them know that I am upset, but do it in a way that facilitates conversation, facilitates us getting to a win-win situation instead of competition, which is what we
Mm.
try to avoid in a
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm, interesting. So this personal responsibility piece that you guys mentioned, how do you bring people to that? Because that's a tough one. I know the
Hmm.
Gottmans, okay, so for example, I know the Gottmans say defensiveness is something that destroys relationships. So,
Hmm.
but in order to not be defensive, people have to be able to take responsibility, and that's really hard. So, how do you guys do that?
Typically kicking and screaming. But
And yeah.
but
Let's
no,
keep it real. Okay.
right, right.
Hmm.
So we do talk a lot about taking personal accountability in the relationship, right? We each played some role in why we're having this challenge right now.
Mhm.
We also say it doesn't necessarily mean we play an equal part.
Hmm.
Like if there's infidelity, for an example,
Sure.
you cheated. You know what I'm saying? So like I didn't actively participate in that, but I may have ignored some red flags
Right.
earlier,
Hmm.
before the incident happened, that I didn't call out, right? Or maybe I didn't listen actively when you said you were looking for X, Y, and Z. And maybe that just didn't trigger for me. So, there's always an avenue where we can take some personal accountability. And the reason why that's so important is because it keeps us out of the victim mentality. If we see that we've contributed in some way, I can't say that I'm fully being victimized by this person. You see what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah.
So now I have to at least be open to the conversation, hearing their perspective, understanding how they are viewing the situation. And likewise, I get to share my piece. Um, Oftentimes, if you're willing to take that personal accountability up front, it smooths over the rough edges a lot quicker.
Hmm.
We can get to a place of mutual understanding, and resolution a lot faster if we're both willing to acknowledge our part.
Yeah, another piece to that is so when a couple comes to us and they say, okay, we got to tell you what happened, and they
Mm.
start going through the story,
Mhm.
um, we break down, we call it a forensic review. Well, let's break down that story and that situation. And we kind of help them identify where could we have pivoted a little bit. And that's kind of a softer way of hinting at the personal accountability as well. That, okay, so this was a point where we could have said it this way instead of that way. And then for the other person, this is a point where you could have asked a question rather than jumping to an assumption. So that's a way, like a sneaky way, or telling you our Jedi mind tricks. Um, a sneaky way of kind of planting the seeds of personal
Mhm.
accountability, knowing that in every situation, there's something we could have done just a little bit differently to get a different outcome. So that helps to broaden people's perspective on what role they may have played, even if it's, I got an attitude back.
Mm.
Right,
We're still responsible for our own reactions, regardless of what the other person does.
right.
Mhm.
So in this personal accountability, obviously awareness is pretty important in order to be able to apply it. And normally in sessions, we're talking in reflection, right? So
Yeah.
how do you develop that skill? How do you communicate around that? What's your messaging?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a great point, Laura, because we've said, and we actually wrote an article about how important reflection really is in just our lives, but especially in
Yeah.
a relationship. Because you have the event, right? The disagreement, the argument, what have you. And most of the time, when stress is high, when emotions are high, we're not going to get to a realistic, reasonable solution. It takes a high degree of emotional intelligence to do that. And most of the time, both parties aren't in that mind space at the same time, right? That's going to be really rare. So you have to be able to reflect and be able to come back to the conversation when cooler heads can prevail.
Mhm.
And this is where the personal accountability aspect is most effective. You know, upon reflection, I was thinking and I, kind of thought about what we were discussing, and I see your point.
Mm.
I could have done XYZ better, or I could have listened when you said that. You know, that's how you can reapproach on a path to reconciliation.
Mhm.
Mm,
But that reflection has to happen away from the heat of the moment.
Mhm. Yeah, we say a lot of times, like if you think about, if there's a relationship and tension is just high, and we're like, okay, I need a minute, I need space. And then people go their separate ways. But most times when people give themselves space, they're just stewing.
mhm.
They're not actually reflecting. They're not actually, it's just ruminating. So we kind of guide our clients on, okay, if you need space, that space needs to be productive.
Right.
Mm.
So you need to be doing something either to help calm yourself, doing some breathing, doing some walking, if you need to do some jumping jacks, whatever. But in that time, really thinking about, okay, let me step away from it and realize, how did I contribute to
Mm,
this situation? So having something tangible to be thinking about,
Mm.
so we're not just stewing and getting deeper and deeper in that victim mindset, that victim spiral that we were talking about before. And then you can come back and have a more productive conversation versus, see, I was thinking, and you shouldn't have,
yeah.
you know,
I have more suggestions for you now that I've thought
Yeah.
about it.
Mine goes
right,
that way.
right. That's just going to escalate things automatically.
Right. Yeah.
So you
So,
kind of train awareness through reflection and the reapproach. Do you ever
Yes.
train it in strengthening it for when you get into disagreements, like noticing your heart rate, or like I notice one of mine is like I'll start interrupting. And if I'm doing that, I'm like, I need a minute because I'm not listening. And that's something that
Mhm.
helps me capture awareness. So do you guys kind of go into that as well?
Yes, we will pause our clients in the session
Okay.
to kind of force them to take a beat because things can get, a bit intense, especially depending on the topic. And they don't have that awareness, to your point, Laura. They don't have that awareness in that moment. And sometimes we have to kind of, encourage them to, let's pause right now because we are not having productive conversation. Just for them to even realize what's happening in your body right now. Do you realize your tone? Do you realize your energy? and how that's not going to get you the result that you want. We talk a
Mm,
lot about, would you rather be right or do you want to reconcile?
Mm.
You can't have both, or you can't do
right.
both. You can't try to force both. You have to have one has to take a higher priority over the other.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
So
really more of a, oh, go
go ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say it's more of a philosophical framework around marriage
Mm.
that we really work on is what is your priority? What are you trying to achieve? Am I trying to achieve rightness where my way is right all the time? Or am I trying to achieve peace, reconciliation, teamwork, right? What am I trying to work towards and produce in this relationship?
What
And
if
I,
they
I would
say
say
safety?
safety is another great one, right? Like if you want to be safe, well, that means not only physically, but emotionally,
Right.
right? Psychologically.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have to have psychological safety, emotional safety, and physical safety, financial safety, right?
Mm.
Economic safety. That goes into it too, right? So
Hmm.
what are your goals? And to be quite frank, most people don't get married with all these intentional goals in mind, right? They're wrapped up in the moment, they're in love, you know what I'm saying? And they just go for it. And then they start thinking about some of the things after the fact, or as they start to bump heads, they see,
Hmm.
wait a minute, our priorities are not in alignment, right? We have
Right.
very different opinions on money. We have very different opinions on intimacy. And we have very different opinions on quality time and what that looks like. And, a lot of this starts happening after you're already married. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
we have to kind of like draw back. We'll deal with the immediate emergency, right?
Mhm.
That's in front of us. And then as we start to work through some of those initial conflicts that brought them to us, we start to dive deeper into some of these broader concepts that create the framework for their marriage. We use the analogy of building a house, right? You build a
Yeah.
house by starting with the foundation, right? Then you build the walls, and then there's these steps. You don't start with the decorations and the curtains and the sofa and the artwork, right? That comes much later in the process.
Mhm.
You start with these foundational framework elements, and
Mm.
that's oftentimes lacking in a lot of relationships.
Married or not.
Right. They they
Yeah.
they have all the window dressings, but they're lacking the substance that supports it through difficult times.
So what if their goals are different? Like, what if that's what kind of comes out? And this could be friendships or relationships,
Mhm.
to your point, or even like parents and adult children, right? That's a
Mhm.
big common
Mhm.
one. How
Yeah.
do you navigate different goals, I guess, from the relationship?
Yeah. So knowing that both goals are valid.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what can happen is, like people can feel like, well, my goal is more important than your goal, no matter what type of relationship it is. And now we're in this competition rather than collaboration and cohesion. Because you have things I don't have, I have things you don't have, and we can help support each other in those goals. But we first need to know what are the goals, how can they be compatible, and know that we have a value for each of that. And there's not this weird hierarchy that gets put
Hmm.
in place as well.
Hmm.
But truthfully,
Question.
there are times where they're not compatible,
Mm.
right? I
Hmm.
mean, we've had quite a few clients that their relationship, the best thing for them was to end the relationship
Hmm.
because there wasn't a way
Yeah.
to merge their two priorities. We had one couple, they weren't married, they were dating, they were considering being married, and they had very different lifestyles,
Hmm.
and wanted to continue in their lifestyles. We were like, look, if you guys are going to be married, those two ideas are literally on the different sides of the spectrum.
Right.
Hmm.
There's very little
Overlap.
overlap there. If you think we should have more of an open type of relationship and I think we should be monogamous,
Oh Lord.
there's not a whole lot of ways we can square that. You know what I'm saying?
Very,
Yeah.
Um,
very far apart. Yeah.
right, right.
Hmm.
And so the question was, well, are we willing to move one way or the other? Or is this, how firm are we in these ideas, in these beliefs?
Hmm.
Yeah, so, ultimately we help them find clarity, which was one of our
Hmm.
goals,
Yeah,
Mm.
on what needed to happen next. And they made those decisions, not us.
right.
So let's say we get the communication and the awareness up and we're having the personal responsibility conversation, but the behavior isn't necessarily changing. What do you guys say about that scenario?
Yeah, we will call it out because sometimes people don't realize that their behavior isn't fully aligned with the goals that they say that they have. And then that's where the awareness can kind of wax and wane depending on the moment. A lot of people think, yeah, I want a partnership. But then when it comes to conversations about finances, for example, they're like, well, I want you to do it my way. I'm the head of the house. You're supposed to. It's like, well, wait. Well, that's not a partnership. The way, how are we defining these words? Do we have a misunderstanding on the words that we're using? So we think our behavior is actually in alignment, but maybe it's not. So it's always a reevaluation that we're doing and definition checking and, making sure are we actually speaking the same or saying the same words, but are we speaking the same language? Because that's not always the case.
And I'm glad you guys said that because that's something I've seen in friendships in my
Yeah.
relationship where like we'll be saying something I'm like, and I'll stop and be like, when you say vulnerable, what do you mean? Because like it
Right.
wasn't making sense. And then when they shared it with me, I'm like, ah, okay, that is a disconnect. And like we don't think to define words unless we're like in elementary school, right? But in
Yeah.
actual day-to-day communication, personally, I feel like a giant nerd. I'm like, I know what this word means, but I want to know what you think it means. And I'm sure people get annoyed with me. And I'm super cool with it because I'd rather communicate clearly. But I think that's an underrated kind of pro communication skill. It's just like the pause to align on definitions versus assume we have the same associations and interpretations of it. Which actually kind of bridges me into a question around that is how do expectations, assumptions, interpretations, associations kind of come into muddy the communication waters?
It's our favorite. So
Ah,
take it
ah.
away.
Yeah. So one of our sessions with every couple is centered around expectations,
Mm,
at least one, if not more. We dive deep into what are your expectations of a committed relationship, of marriage, of this person. Have you communicated those expectations? Are they shared? Where are the gaps in understanding between the two of you?
Hmm.
Because to your point, Laura, that when we start to dig deeper, that is where a lot of the disconnects live, is in those unspoken and unmet expectations. I mean,
Hmm.
that is why most marriages fail,
Yeah.
is because of unmet, and uncommunicated expectations. Now, they may call it unreconcilable differences, or they may call it, money fights and money problems. But it comes back to we did not align on our expectations around how we would manage our finances. We didn't
Hmm.
align on our expectations on what intimacy means and what it looks like in practice
For me.
for me individually and then for
Hmm.
us corporately, right? We didn't align on what healthy conflict resolution looks like for our dynamic,
mm,
you know, and both parties are just trying to enforce their understanding
Hmm.
upon their partner.
Or
And
assume they should know.
correct, instead of looking for that win-win opportunity.
Yeah.
We
mm.
don't use the word compromise because that could be a dirty word at times. We say creating win-win opportunities. And
Yeah.
the way that you do that is, where do we agree? First of all, we use a very funny example. So let's say we're hungry. We're both hungry. She wants Mexican food. I want pizza, right? And a lot of couples argue about what are we having for dinner tonight, right? If you've been in a relationship for any matter of time, you've argued about what's for dinner tonight. So a way to find a win-win in that scenario is to be like, okay, look, clearly we're both hungry. I'm not feeling Mexican food. You're not feeling pizza. Why don't we do Chinese food,
Right. I thought you were
right?
going to say make Mexican pizza personally,
You
but
can
I
do
see
that
where
too,
you're going.
right? You,
Yep.
you can do that too, right? For sure.
Yep.
But it's finding that. What is that option
Right.
where, okay, it may not be 100% my preference. It may not be 100% her preference, but it's something we both like. We both get value out of. It's
Mhm.
meeting our need,
Yeah.
right? And it's something I can get behind. So, you don't actually feel like you're losing anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's different when every time we have this disagreement on what we're going to eat for dinner, I am domineering or I force my hand,
Right.
right? Well, I'm just driving. Since I'm driving, I'm going to the pizza place,
Mm.
Right.
you know, or she manipulates me through her emotion,
Mm.
or tries to force me to see her way by guilt trips or silent treatments or withholding affection, or you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So those would be more unhealthy ways to resolve that conflict. And what we try to show people is there's a third path. There is a third path that you both can live with,
Yep.
where
Yeah.
your needs still are met. It's still something you both like. You both like Chinese food, so we're good there.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And I agree that I always say the goal is to get on the same team somehow, right?
Exactly.
Because you are
Mhm.
in the long run. I
Mhm.
am curious to learn more about this emotional manipulation component because I see it come up all the time in a diversity of ways. And I think it's different for different energies and different genders, depending on how individuals embody those. Um, can you speak to like this stereotypical masculine emotional manipulation versus the stereotypical feminine manipulation?
Mhm. You want to do the masculine, or you want to do the feminine,
Sure.
or you want to do the feminine?
That's probably the least controversial for me to do the
What's the
masculine.
middle ground, guys? What's the middle ground?
I can do masculine if you want to do feminine.
No, we're good. Uh, I would say for men, typically they manipulate through anger.
Mm.
Uh, they try to be more controlling and domineering. Um, and it doesn't necessarily have to come out with aggression per se, but it can be setting, very firm lines. Uh, and it doesn't leave a lot of space for their partners to express themselves, to share their opinion, to give their opinion.
Mm.
Um, it's just kind of a expectation of you get it, get down or lay down kind of thing.
Mhm.
Get with the program or get out, get out. So it's really a lot of that energy. And it comes from insecurity
Mm.
a lot of times. It comes from a feeling of, um, with men, there's just so much competition built into our dynamics with one another.
Mhm.
We're taught at very young ages that you don't want to be taken advantage of. Other males are potentially threats to you,
Mhm.
whether that be to your physical safety or your prospects for dating, your prospects for jobs, all these kinds of things. Right? This is taught to us subtly from the time we're very young boys to manhood. So we get into these romantic relationships and we're asked to be vulnerable. We're asked to let our guards down. And that's scary, because that feels like I'm exposing myself to be hurt, to be attacked. Uh, and most men are very uncomfortable with that. So they try to mask all of that insecurity through showing aggression and anger and things like that.
I'd also add even just like a distance. There can be an emotional distance
Mhm.
Mm.
that men can take on, and that can be a form of emotional manipulation of not engaging as well, and how that can show up in some relationships too.
Yeah.
Um,
Broad disclaimer though, this is
this
painting
we're
with a
talking about
very broad
generalizing.
brush. This
Yeah.
is
Yes.
very generalized.
Don't come for us in the comments.
Right,
I
right,
did specify
Yes,
stereotypical
right.
in your
exactly.
guys'
Stereotypical.
defense. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And like stereotypical on the female side. So it could be, I think the obvious ones that people may think about is when you're emotional manipulation is the tears or the like big reaction. So he says something of, oh, could you do this a little bit better or this would help out in this way? And rather than accountability, it can go to, oh my, you've never listened to me and now you're coming at me. And, it can kind of just get flipped in that way in a little bit of like a dramatized way, kind of in like more of the stereotypical obvious. But there's also some subtleties too, as he mentioned, the withholding affection. Or, we had a couple where they've gotten into an argument and she was making lunches and she didn't make his lunch.
Mm.
Like he had to fend for himself. So
Oh
there's some of
God.
those things too of, well, when I had this, you didn't do that, so I'm not doing that, right? The withholding in different ways.
Yeah.
Physical intimacy is a big piece there too
Mhm.
of, withholding from that because you know that may be a desire of theirs and well, you didn't want to listen to me, so why would I listen to you now? Kitchen's closed,
Like
right? I'm going
transactional.
to bed.
Yeah.
So it can look a lot of different ways too, just depending on your personality as well and how it shows up. But those are some of the more subtleties that we don't always consider as well.
Thank you for brilliantly and calmly sharing both sides. Way to go, guys. Clearly, you've done your work. Um, yeah, one of the things I encounter, and it's kind of like a backwards thing sometimes it feels like, it's like men and women, again, we're speaking stereotypically, are raised with kind of different narratives of like what it means to be a good woman, what it means to be a good man, and then throw ethnicity and culture, blah, 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 right? Fun, special little mixing pot.
Yeah.
Um, and something I've encountered a lot with women specifically is they'll get frustrated when their husbands won't do something and they won't actually let them do something,
Mm.
right? So they'll like, I use how I explain to them, like, how do you expect him to sit in the chair if you're sitting in the chair? They're like, what
Yep.
do you mean? And I'm like, you want him to take out the trash and you ask him, or you just expect him to know you want him to take out the trash. And like, that's not how it works.
Hmm.
Like, there needs to be clear communication. There you go, two of yours, about what the goals are, who's responsible for what, how to communicate when you need support, right? And if you want him to lead more, if you want him to take you on a date, when he does, if you don't like the restaurant, don't talk shit about it because then
Right.
he's not going to feel like he can. It's the effort, it's not the perfection. And similarly, there are, components within men of like, well, just tell me what to do, right? And it's like, I understand where you're coming from because we're wanting to please each other, but I use this kind of like codependence versus independence. Like we choose to move together versus we feel attached and pulled towards each other, right? And this is my human being, this is your human being. And if you want to go to this restaurant for our date, let me know that. Otherwise, I'm going to choose somewhere, knowing what I know about you and hoping things go well. And similarly, I'm going to see when the dishes need to be done, but if they aren't done perfectly, if you criticize me, I'm not going to want to do the dishes again. Right. So
Yep.
this kind of like people don't know how to ask for their needs in a healthy way almost.
Hmm.
And I'm guessing that kind of comes into the communication container.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you how you handled that with a special little asterisk of the role of nonverbals.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, we know that, what do they say, 60, 70% of communication is nonverbal.
Hmm.
So it's our body language, our tone, our facial expressions, just how we express our energy, right? I can be very intense with the expression of my energy. Most of the time, if I'm frustrated, she knows, not because I'm saying anything or doing anything, but just my energy positioning, my facial expressions are telling the story.
Hmm.
So that definitely plays a role. And that's some of those more subtle ways both parties can manipulate each other It's through those nonverbal cues, the silent treatments, the looks of disappointment or disdain,
Mm,
for decisions that
Yeah.
are made.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it does require a high degree of self-awareness to kind of number one, know that it's happening, and number two, start doing something about it. It can be very hard because again, you don't see your own face, when you're frustrated. So
Yeah.
you don't know that you're making that face again. So but to your other point about not sharing clear communication expectations and stuff like that, huge, huge point of emphasis with our couples. And you hit the nail on the head in how you described it. And it's funny because when we first were dating, I told Kiana straight up, I was like, listen, I am not a mind reader. If
Mm,
there's something that you want, you need to tell me, right? Now, sometimes I will get it right. Sometimes I'll guess right or I'll, take the initiatives. But don't bank on that, all the time.
yeah.
Tell me if there's something that you need. And from here on out, I got it. But if we lead with the assumptions and you should know, or that's just a recipe for disaster. And I get it. Like, I get it. Because most of the time it seems to come from the ladies to the male
Mhm.
that, you should know, or, how did you not see that? And da 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 da.
Obvious.
Right. And I definitely understand where you're coming from. The sink is full.
You know the dishes need
We're
to be
both
done.
adults. You can do the dishes, right? Like, I get that. That is obvious. Yes, it is that obvious. However, we never know how the other person is interpreting their surroundings. So,
Mhm.
yes, they will tell you, yes, the dishes are full. And they may have a legitimate reason why they withheld from doing
Mhm.
and a lot of times it's rooted in a past experience. Well, the last time I did that, you yelled at me because you said I didn't do it right, or I didn't put the dishes in the right spot in the dishwasher, or blah, blah, blah. So I just figured you didn't want me doing them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So again, we didn't clearly communicate up front. Assumptions are being made, expectations are not being met. And so we're now in conflict.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, I think the dishes are a good example because I was thinking of, several couples, again, married or not, it doesn't matter. Um, where again, the you should know, or why aren't you helping me? Right? You're over there on the couch watching TV, and I'm in the kitchen doing dishes. And, the way of that can come out in the nonverbals is I may clink them a little louder.
right. Right here, the
People
slamming
think
of the
on
cabinets
purpose.
randomly. Yeah.
Right, because it's like, hey, don't you hear? There's a lot of stuff in here that you could be helping with, and that's how that comes out, right? Because you're like, I don't care if I'm interrupting their show, you know, they didn't want to help, right? So that's how that comes out when you don't communicate.
Mm,
And then it causes those further issues because then they're like, okay, what's wrong with them? Because
right.
no question was even asked.
Right.
And then you just get in this habit of you just do it and the resentments just build. But then it's not really fair to the other person because we're not even letting them know what we need.
Right. I totally
So
agree.
I'm hearing themes. One is definitely expectations. Are there other things that you guys see as trends that are problems in relationships that people can kind of be on the lookout for?
Yeah, we actually just had this conversation the other day. Just some broader observations, just looking at where we are in our world, in our society. There's
Mm.
all these stats that we keep hearing about how people are delaying marriage longer and longer. They're
Mhm.
delaying having children longer or choosing not to have children altogether. The economics around just surviving, in our world today, buying a home is increasingly becoming out of reach for more and more people. So those
Yeah.
hallmarks of why people would get married or why people would be in these long-term relationships, the landscape is shifting, right? For our parents or grandparents' generation, it was pretty clear math,
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, there's legal reasons and restrictions on what women could do and all those things. Um, But I think as the world has changed, as women have gained more independence, more autonomy, more economic freedom, it's no longer women are getting married because they have to, right? If they are going to get married, they're choosing to, and they have expectations of the partner that they're choosing to marry. So it's not like I just have to accept any old thing because I have no other options. I can't work. I can't own a bank account. I can't own a home of my own. Like obviously all that has changed. And with that change, I'm not sure we are preparing people for the realities of today and what it takes to sustain a relationship,
Hmm.
right? The top down approach just doesn't really work for the modern person, for specifically women, right? It just doesn't work because they do have so much autonomy. They can, you know, it's a want you, not need you kind of scenario today,
Hmm.
Right.
right? And I think a lot of men are struggling with that
Yep.
transition.
Even intimacy. I got my toys.
Right.
I don't need you.
Yeah,
Like
right.
it's
There's a
all of
lot
that
of
too.
substitutes today. There's so many substitutes for what society had created in the past, right? Like
Hmm.
it was this dependence on a male figure. And now it's not that.
Right.
So it requires men to step up. It requires more of us, frankly, if we
Mhm.
want marriages to survive and thrive into the future, you know.
Plug, quick
And
plug.
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I totally agree with this, and it's a conversation I've had with a bunch of different people because I think it's really important we communicate about it. And I think it connects to the male loneliness epidemic, not only because
Mhm.
relationships aren't bonding in the time, but also like men historically aren't super open and vulnerable with their friends. They kind of like the whole, what is it on Instagram? Horrible reference, I know, but like someone goes golfing with their buddy who just got divorced and comes home to the wife. And she's like, what did you hear? Like, what happened? He's like, I don't know. We didn't talk about it. He's like, you didn't ask a question?
Right.
Like, what? Right. And it's like,
Like it didn't come up.
right. And so
We're there to golf. Not
there's this skills
yeah.
gap
Yeah.
in being able to have vulnerable conversations, which is whatever you identify as, we are
Mhm.
vulnerable creatures. So we need that support. And I have a lot of empathy for men because they don't have the skills. They were raised in a culture that literally told them do the opposite, and now they're being asked to be able to do something different, but never taught how to. How I view it, so I'm curious your opinion, is that it's a hard reality that will benefit the evolution of men's mental health because building the skill of emotional intelligence and regulation and being able to show up not just for a spouse, but for their friends. Um, doesn't make it fair nor easy, any of that, but I do see it as a like women are in this space of like want not need, and it is creating this kind of like gap. And as they close the gap, it allows men to feel more whole, more worthy, for lack of better terms, because that's where everyone goes, but also to kind of build more of that like support circle because girls need girls and guys need guys.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm curious your opinion. Do you think the evolution into, more emotionally intelligent men is a bad thing? It's a hard evolution, but is it bad?
It's hard to put a value judgment on good or bad.
Sure.
I think there are those out there that will tell you it's bad. It's the feminization of men and, taking men's masculinity and all these kind of narratives we hear on social media and in politics and stuff like that. And I get where they're coming from, but again, we have to understand their background thought process on why they have that perspective to begin with.
Yeah.
There were certain pressures and expectations placed upon both men and women
Hmm.
for a long time in our culture, in Western society. Where if you go to other societies, other cultures, it's different, right? Like they have different expectations of gender and all of these kinds of things. It's not the same everywhere you go in the world. It's not taboo for men to do certain types of tasks and for women to do certain types of tasks. So, it's very much a part of Western culture.
Mhm.
that we have these defined gender roles, and how those things show up in the context of a marriage. And I just think we're in a time where those expectations are being renegotiated.
Mm.
And I think all parties have to accept the new reality and say it's okay. Like it's okay if my wife makes more money than me. It doesn't diminish the role I play or the value I bring to my household,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
nor does it mean just because I make more money than she does that somehow I have the scepter,
Right.
and I'm the one controlling all of the decisions in the household. There
Mhm.
needs to be this mutual respect for the value we each bring to our household and to the relationship. Yes, we're going to show up differently in how we express ourselves, and how we provide, and how we things that we just naturally are better at doing than others. And I think we have to find a way to value it all equally.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's going to be the transition. If we're talking about sustainable change over time when it comes to marriages, it's more of that kind of style. I don't really buy into a lot of the more common thought processes out there around men's masculinity and all this kind of stuff. Like I don't think expression of anger and aggression means you're more or less masculine, right? I think it's more about, are you emotionally intelligent enough to set those things aside and do what's right in the moment,
Mm.
right? Can you put someone else's needs above your own when is needed? I don't think selfishness is inherently masculine.
No,
I think
it's
that's a
not.
learned trait. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? That again, our society has supported for so long.
Right.
Um, and I think we're being asked to show up differently in society. And it's going to be a hard transition for many if they're not having these kinds of conversations and dealing with some of these imposed ideals on what men and women's roles are in the society.
Mhm.
Um, so until we have those broader conversations, it's going to be a challenge. But I know a lot of men who are dealing with these topics day to day, single and married, and they're seeing the world around them change. They're not sure how they should show up in this space. And I think it's also important to say that there are valid points on both sides of these discussions.
Yeah.
So often we just want to say, well, they're right and they're wrong. And it's like,
Mhm.
there's a
Yeah.
reason why each party has their perspective.
Win-win.
And it's like, right, right. How do we find the win-win? How can two things be true at the same time?
Mhm.
And I think having more of this broader, nuanced conversation is going to be important as we go forward.
I have a
I agree.
controversial question. Listening to all of this, just trying to think of it from a little bit more of a distant perspective, what do men have to look forward to in a relationship? Now, Laura mentioned the loneliness epidemic, or somebody did. Someone mentioned that.
I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
Laura
Laura.
Okay.
did.
Mhm.
So maybe not being lonely. But aside from that, what are they going to be getting out of these relationships? Because now you're telling men you're going to have to put in more effort, you're going to have to step up. That doesn't sound appealing to me at all. And of course, I'm not a man, but just from like an observer standpoint, I'm like, well, this doesn't. What's the selling point? And I think my hunch is that a lot of men are asking themselves that same question because it seems like there is a lack of commitment, um, more so probably on the male side than the female. At least from my observations, I have no data to support that. So this is just solely from observation. But that's what it seems like out in the dating world that um, girls are almost like trying to convince men that this is a good idea to commit.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, what do I get out of the deal? Good question, actually.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Knowing if you look at it at a foundational piece, that one person doesn't have every skill.
Mhm.
And, being with a partner, there's skills that they have that even if we work together, that you may be able to leverage, that you may be able to help you grow and develop if that's something that you're wanting to do. Um, I know there is research about how when a male is married, his success rate when it comes
Mm.
to like the workforce and things like that can drastically go up. And it may not only just be because the woman may be doing the household things. There's other benefits of that partnership. For us, we see each other as teammates. That we're
Mhm.
teammates, we're partners, we work together. There's pieces that you bring to the table that I didn't even think about that, and vice versa. And we're able to really merge those aspects to be stronger. So if you're someone that already thinks you have it all and you're the best thing since sliced bread, then you're not going to feel like you need a
Yeah.
partner or need, anyone else because you can buy whatever you would want or nowadays everything is just kind of out there. You may not feel like there's much of a benefit, but if you do desire to grow, to develop, to kind of share life with someone, then there's a lot of benefits from that angle too, from my opinion. What do you think?
I think it's a very good question. And I agree that probably a lot of people, men and women, are
Hmm.
asking that same question. What is the point? What is the ultimate point if
Hmm.
it's no longer strictly about having children? It's no longer strictly about provision. It's no longer easy to buy a home and kind of have your whole white picket fence ideal.
Right.
If all of these things are now not as easily accessible as they once were, then what is ultimately the point of being in a marriage? And I think that question is valid for both men and women, because as we just discussed, women
Hmm.
have way more autonomy and freedom than they used to. Not
Hmm.
perfect, not equal, but still much better today than our
Oh,
great
yeah.
grandmothers had, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
um, I think on both sides, we have to look at that question and find new ways to value that relationship. If we think marriage is an institution worth saving, then we are going to have some of those hard conversations as a society about then what are we doing it for,
Hmm.
right? And I think the answer might be some new ideas that come to the table, but also some ideas from maybe the distant past. Like why did humans decide to be in community to begin with? Like, where did this concept of marriage come from at all? You know what I mean? It didn't just start in the 1900s. You know what I mean? It's been around for as long as humans have been in society. There's been marriage or something like it. So I think it's again taking a step back and really just having this broader conversation about what do we value um, as a society, as an individual. Is it just purely about what I quote unquote get out of it?
Hmm.
Because that sounds like a very selfish, self-centered way of viewing a partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of things we do that we don't get direct payout for, right?
Right.
It's just because it
Feels
you
good.
makes me feel good, or it just it's just something that I just like, or it doesn't have to be always about a tangible payout. And I think marriage is one of those things where if you care about personal growth and development, if you care about uh, building a meaningful relationship with another human being, if you care about intimacy and closeness, not just sex, but other things too, if you care about sharing your life with someone else,
Hmm.
uh, those things are meaningful too. It's not
Yeah.
just about buying a house and having a couple of kids. Uh, there's
Tax
plenty of
breaks?
couples.
No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just about those things, right? Those aren't even as great as they used to be either.
They are.
And,
They are.
so still, again, I think it is a shift in mindset
Yeah.
around what do we value as a society.
Hmm.
And we're seeing this across all of our institutions, education, government, our economy, marriage, religion, all of it is under scrutiny right now and
Yeah.
being challenged. Churches are closing left and right. People are leaving, Christianity and all of that in a record at record levels. We see what's happening with the government. all kind of confusion and chaos there. Uh, Education, budget cuts constantly, governments trying to, move us to this. Uh, we live in Texas, so we got the voucher program thing going on and all of that, defunding public education. So,
Privatize.
there's a lot of challenges happening to these institutions that we
Mhm.
thought were so solid. They're
Right.
all under attack,
Yeah.
and marriage is no different.
Hmm.
It's like a total redefinition of what life is, which is challenging and scaring and freeing in a way, because you
Right,
do get to navigate it your way. It's just terrifying at the same time.
right.
hmm
Yeah.
Most
Okay,
people
I have
aren't really
one last
living.
question. Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say most people aren't really living intentionally.
Right.
They don't know why they want these certain
Mhm.
things. They just feel like, well, that's just what you do.
Right.
So
That's a
when we
blueprint.
just kind of, yeah, when you just kind of jump into relationships or jump into jobs or jump into this or that, it's not intentional. There's not the forethought. So people end up in these really messy situations and then they wonder why. So I
Yeah,
think as a society, we don't take enough time to really reflect on why am I doing what I'm doing.
totally agree. I have one last question because I know we have to close up, but it's kind of like a fun one.
Mhm.
Imagine you guys had a superpower where you could, every couple that comes into your office, you could give them the skills you think are required for a healthy relationship. What skills would you give them? And I know like it depends on the person, but like what are the skills between the two of them that would be required in your professional opinion for a healthy relationship?
Mm.
It's good. I know one, I would say it's emotional intelligence.
Mm,
If I was able to give that to a couple. Um, and then also like the humility.
Mm.
mm,
Those would be two that come to mind, which incorporates the personal accountability, but
yeah.
just that willingness to not just elevate yourself over the other, to pause and reflect, um, I think would be really valuable.
Mm. Those are good. I would say empathy,
Mm.
in the sense like the ability to really see things from another person's perspective, um, would be a big one. And then the second one, since she gave two, I guess I'll give two. Um, the ability to clearly communicate your intentions.
Mm.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people are looking for you all, where would they find you?
Yes, you can go directly to our website, souljourneyproject.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Soul Journey Project. We do respond to messages. We'd love to connect with you and engage further.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time
Thank you.
today and this conversation. And we'll see you online.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye.